You see the seeds of the word everywhere. And I struggle with a sort of apparent everythingness of the secular world. I don't, for lack of a better term, there's like a sort of, yes, I could talk about everything in life, or I could just, focus on this small little bit, which is like the Christian worldview.
Oh, yeah.
But then I think seeing more and more how Christ impacts every aspect of our lives is that it is actually more universal than you think. And I think like mystically, he's there in the things where we thought he wasn't at all. So I think there's actually this expanse of the ways in which you can express yourself as a Christian in your art. And I don't think it's always explicitly, hey, let me introduce you to my friend, the Lord Jesus Christ.
Welcome to the Creative Community Podcast presented by Destination Arte. I'm David, and I'm Han Solo today. Mark is on the road and sorely missed, but had a great opportunity today to catch up with someone that I met for the first time right before this interview. His name is Carl Graham, and he is a video director from the Philippines. I met him through a friend and reached out to him. His work is awesome. He talks a little bit about it, but what Carl shares in today's interview is really exciting and really encouraging because he talks about some training that he got past his college years that helped him know that he needed to move into directing his pursued choice of profession. And then he talks about a little bit about like his process and what he tries to do when he's visualizing a story. And then he talks about the most important thing that he wants people to get out of his work. And I think that part of the interview, last third of the interview, it's going to be worth you listening to it because what he has to share is just incredible. So be sure to stick around. But without further ado, here's my conversation with director Carl Graham.
I've been directing professionally since about 2015. And I've always had a preference for design over drama, in the sense that you were talking about story a little bit earlier, but I've always thought my preference was to have things that were visually impactful over story per se. And I always thought that was where I was at. I was doing a workshop before I got professionally into directing. So my background is in, I'm going to say graphic design, or multimedia arts was the course I took in college. And I actually resisted video because I thought it was the longest pipeline. And I was like, I don't have time for that. Graphic design is you conceptualize, you sketch, and then you iterate, right? Like you see output right away. But with film or video, it's just so long. You make the thing like 3 or 4 times.
Right.
You've got like, you write the script, then you storyboard, and then you make like an animatic if you want, and then you you just constantly you're constantly making the thing over and over again. So I resisted it in college, and when I took that workshop before I was professionally directing, I was like, I think I openly said like, yeah, I'm not big on film, and everyone else in the class was like, I'm all about story and that, but actually I think I've realized more and more how design is telling a story. I think it's just telling it in a different way. And I noticed it was really nice to see films that spoke to me from a design perspective, and I saw how that can actually still be a part of it. And yeah, so basically I'm a director, and I've always liked, and I say I'm a director, and I think when I was maybe a few years ago, or when I was starting out, that term is like highly glorified here in the Philippines. Like, how you've got terms like doctor so and so,
okay, yeah,
attorney so and so, and in the Philippines, I've spoken about this with my friends, and how we'll like slap on a title on on anything. So I don't know if in America you guys say engineer so and so, but we do here, and you say attorney so and so. And So here also you say director name, but except we shorten it to say direct. So it's like direct something, whatever their name is. And then I found out with my friends that like in a set in America, you just say Mr. Scorsese.
Sure, sure.
So 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 I think just there you see how there's kind of a glorification of the role. And I think everywhere, like when a movie does well, everyone's like, who's the director? But I think what I've found is at least the place that I find comfort in it, or the place I feel comfortable in it, is it just feels like you're someone who, in some ways, you're just someone who moves things along. Like they, like production as a whole is so, it's like a giant machine, and they just had to outsource the decision making to like whoever says yes or no to one person. Like it's just accidental to the process in some ways. It's like, well, someone's got to decide, so let's make it be you. And then if the person makes good decisions, they'll give you the job again. Like, okay, well, you made some good decisions and we ended up in a place we like. And it starts to seem that if not for those decisions, the thing wouldn't have been made well. But actually, like it would have still been made. Like it's just a small part of the whole thing. But they had to give it to someone. And so when I say I'm a director, I say that with, I think there's a specific skill set sometimes that lends itself to that. And I think I like working with people, and I like elevating the work that in a team, like taking something that someone has done and giving them feedback, and then seeing it come back even better is such a rush for me, more than saying that I did it myself. Um, but just to put a button on this intro, ironically, since diving into CGI and 3D, because of the pandemic, I finally like took the dive to learn 3D. Story and cinema have actually piqued my interest more, and I just finished, I don't know if you can say just finished, but a few months ago, a super short film. So my main medium as a director is in commercials. So like I direct commercials here. And the Dry Bones film that I did is super short. It's like 45 seconds, or I think it's a minute all in all. And I think that that medium of short form from commercials definitely lent itself. Like I just wanted to make sort of almost like a trailer type thing of what I saw.
Yeah, that's so fascinating, because I'm sure that 45 seconds represents a few hours, being
Oh yeah, a lot of hours.
a
Yeah.
lot of hours, right? It's not just a, I threw this together, even though that's what the bones they're being thrown together. So I guess my question, man, I got so many questions for you, but I want to come back to the films that inspire you at the end. Don't let me forget. So
Okay.
did you study film in college and you didn't want to be a director, or is that what you said earlier? You didn't want to study film. You studied like a graphic design. Is that what you said? Or how did you know, was that workshop the thing that made you realize I want to be a director? Or was there a moment where you were asked to direct something and that's when you knew?
In college, no, I took a course called multimedia arts, um, and it was in the De La Salle College of Saint Benilde here. And actually, what happened is, I feel like this is kind of morphing into the first question, um, in a way. But basically, when I was in when I was in school, it was all graphic design, and our college was highly technical, and there were the film students as well. So there was multimedia art students, and it felt like there was like kind of this practicality to the course. Like everyone who took it was basically like, well, either they were coasting and they didn't know what they wanted to do, so
Uh,
they just took the course that had everything. Because there were animation students too, and there were film students, and the animation students were the ones, at least to my mind, were like, no, I'm gonna go hard. I'm gonna work. I'm gonna work for Pixar. I'm gonna tell my stories. And then film also was like, yeah, I love this art form, right? Or like, and then MMA or multimedia arts, um, either we were the guys who like couldn't make a decision, or we were the ones who just had a practicality about I'm an artist, but I have to make money, and it's more likely someone will hire me to make a poster or to design a website than they will to hire me to create a whole film. So so that was the vibe of people who were taking the course. But we had some subjects where we had to learn video production, and it was just so long to me. And but when I graduated, I kind of fell into it. First, there was this project I had, and I was kind of resigned to video. I said, no more video, because I had done a few projects, and I was like, no more video. I'm gonna focus. I'm gonna go hard on voiceover, I thought, and I still do voiceovers on the side. And I do enjoy it. And I was gonna go hard with it, but then like all in. But then a friend asked me, "Hey, can you do this video for us?" It was like an AVP, and like an audiovisual presentation, like a corporate video for someone,
Sure.
for her friend's company. And I said, I was almost gonna say no, and then I said, um, I talked to them and heard their brief, and they wanted something like a pseudo animation. They were looking for something kind of stop motion. And I remember I really enjoyed stop motion in college. And there's not many directors who do stop motion here. So actually, if it's a stop motion gig, like I'll often be in the bid just because like the bid is like the request for different directors, right? So if it's a stop motion thing, I'll tend to be in it. But I really enjoyed stop motion in college, and so I said, yeah, let's try it. I'll hire my friend who's an illustrator, and she'll make the assets, and I'll hire my friend who's a photographer, and he'll do the light. And then so there's less work for me, and then we'll split it. The money was so small, and I thought like, yeah, this will be fine. Like they got such a deal with how much work we ended up putting into it. So I said it'd probably take 2 days to shoot 2 minutes worth of stop motion. Like what a bad estimate. Like I was so far from the process. So we shot it in our friend's house. So we ended up getting really close with their parents because it was supposed to be 2 days. We were just gonna sleep over and then finish it off. It ended up taking 2 weeks. So we were there. I think we eventually had to go home. Then we came back.
That's so funny that you said that about their parents.
Yeah, we're like now when we run into their parents like in the mall. Well, they live in the south of the metro, and so we don't see them much, especially after COVID. But then when you would see them, I feel like I'm seeing like a relative. I'm seeing like, oh, we call like moms and dads of other friends of ours. You say tita or tito, which is like Filipino for auntie or uncle.
Yeah.
And so you're like, oh, tita, like, oh, it's so nice to see you. You know, like it's almost like yeah, like an auntie I hadn't
That's
seen in a
awesome.
while. And it's funny because it was so crazy. Like it was so much more work than we thought. But the funny thing is like coming out of it, like I loved it. That part of it, like the stop motion, it was so much work. But so that was like the start of like, okay, maybe I'll stick to animation, video-ish. And then eventually my friend saw this workshop thing, and I was like, I'm not paying that much for a workshop because it was relatively expensive for like, it wasn't like a throwaway workshop. It's like a month-long workshop. And you got to meet the industry directors here because I think they needed more talent. So they were trying to expand like the youths that were getting into it. And so they set up a workshop, and I did that workshop too. And I took the commercial directing version, and I had a really good teacher. He had just come he had won like an award for a film he finished in Australia. And so he came in, they hired him. The company that was running the workshop hired him, and he was fresh to the industry in the Philippines, but he wasn't like a new director. He was just fresh to the industry. So all the ins and outs were so clear to him, so that when he was when he was teaching, it felt so fresh. And so he was also a really good teacher. So at the end of the workshop, there was this option there was sort of an unspoken option to kind of try and apprentice. Spoken and unspoken, but like, like if you did it and they said no, you'd kind of be like, kind of, I guess, embarrassed or something like that. So I finished the workshop and I had, I texted the director and I asked him if I could apprentice under him. And he didn't reply for a long time. So like, okay, I guess that's a bust. But he was actually like preparing his short film. And so I ended up apprenticing under him and learning so much. And that was basically the launch pad into commercial directing from corporate video, which is very different. Like there's lots of people do video here, but there's very distinct industries. Like you're a wedding videographer or you're a corporate video guy. And then to get into commercials is quite a jump. So doing that apprenticeship, I learned so much, like way more than I ever learned in school. And I know that like when Lily, my daughter, gets older, if she wanted to do an apprenticeship, I feel like it's one of the best ways to learn compared to school, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool because that's something that we stress around here a lot is that continued education. Like you can go to school, get a degree, and you can learn a lot there. And usually what you do there is you make a lot of friends. But then after
Yeah.
school is when you'd kind of then you start to level up by taking really specific courses and connecting with professionals and getting that mentorship. So, man, I want to ask you this question, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but I know that the Philippines for a long time has been kind of a place that gets kind of outsourced work as far as like
Mm.
animation goes. And like even now, I'm sure in the 3D realm, there's like studios there that are just doing the work that the studio here doesn't want to do. So I wanted to know, like, what is the like goal? Like, do you guys like, is there kind of like, well, I'm just going to be asset creator for, I'm just going to be a lighting person for the studio here? Or is it, you talked about people wanting to work at Pixar. Like, is there a track for that? Or how do you see that working out? Because it sounds like you got this first job and you automatically switched to director mode without realizing it. Because you're like, well, I'll just hire
Mm.
this person. I'll hire this person. And, I'm sure you had to do some of the work yourself, but like, is there a director path or is this workshop what you're talking about kind of the way to do that?
Mm. So I think in terms of the kind of outsourced nature of a lot of the work in the Philippines, I think that's very true. And I think what actually ends up, I think effectively though, at its best, I feel like the Philippines gets a lot of outsourced work, and I think it's known for like the quality that it brings to it. I think in animation, from what I can tell from the shows I've been watching, like Korea seems really big too, especially for like um cell animation. But I think the Philippines is still pretty big. So I'm not like deep in the industry of like doing work for studios abroad in terms of outsourcing like shows and stuff. I do think though that there's a good rep the Philippines has for the quality that it brings. And I think that's across the board. Like a lot of the call centers here, because Filipinos have a relatively neutral accent compared to maybe other cheaper labor countries or relatively cheaper labor countries, that it also gets a lot of call center work. But I also think, basically the quality that the Philippines brings to a lot of those industries is higher. I think also, I had previously had a maybe more, what's the term, view on this, where it was like, oh, that's so bad that we're kind of just getting quote unquote the scraps or the work that
Sure.
other people don't. But I think effectively it's not so bad if you see like the different angles of it. Like for one, I think the disparity of like expected income from workers in first world countries and workers in the Philippines is, it's so vast that you could charge really well from the Philippine standard of living perspective for whatever work you're doing to a company abroad, and they will still think it's cheap. So
Wow.
you have like a really good competitive advantage. Like, so from the perspective of like outsourced work, that's really great because like, I mean, it's great in the sense that great for the company that's doing the arbitrage, in the sense that, hey, I know some guys who can set you up, and then they're putting the markup, and hopefully they're paying their people well, but they've got the markup, and this studio is doing really well, like this Philippine studio who's got contacts abroad. But even from a freelancer standpoint, which is more what I do with, so I do a lot of work as a commercial director here, but then even then, the goal for me is to do more international work and hopefully retain the like expenses needed from a living in the Philippines kind of perspective. So that also makes it so that I mean, if I can keep my expenses low wherever we live, then it makes it so that there's more leeway to choose broad projects. And choosing projects means, I think, directing the way your art goes. Like if you've made enough on a project so that you can pause for a month or so and do a personal project, that's really meaningful because it makes it so that you can guide your career a lot better than if you were just taking whatever you're getting, which is a lot of the that's usually the case when you're starting out. So yeah, does that make sense? So to
Oh
answer
yeah.
yeah, to answer your question, it's in some ways it's kind of weird that like there's a lot of outsourced work, but in other senses, I think whether you work at a studio, but maybe more if you're a freelancer, if you exploit that sort of difference in income, you can actually, like, imagine you're a freelancer in the Philippines and you know how to price, because so many of us, you have to like learn the disparity, because it's like blows your mind how much it's like 3 times what you'd think you could charge here.
Yeah.
So so when someone's like someone contacts you like, hey, good work, and then you're like, okay, I'll charge this. I'm like, oh, I hope they say yes. And they're probably sitting at their desk going, yes, of course, yes. Can you do 3 times the work? And then so once you know how to price, it's actually it's really strategic.
Yeah.
And that's
Well, thank you for answering that, because that it's just a question I've had and I haven't had anyone to ask of it. Just because I've, as I've gotten more into the storytelling and the animation and interviewing different people, I've just kind of started to learn about this. It sounds like it's almost a blessing because, like you said, you can take that money and then do a personal project, which is, to me, that's how you kind of learn a new skill or expand a little, because you can kind of get in your groove with your commercial projects, and this is what they want, and this is what they expect, and this is what you do. But if you don't have time to try something a little new over here, or try a dry bones film where you probably learned something in that film that maybe you weren't doing with other projects, I'm sure it might not be something that comes right to your mind, but that's what I find whenever I make myself a little personal thing, whatever it is, if
yeah.
it's a video or if it's an audio or something, I learned something about whatever the process was I was going through. So I appreciate you answering that. I'm really grateful. So
Yeah, I'd say like because I always felt like when I would be either listening to a podcast or watching a show, like the more practical the speaker was, the more like I appreciated it, because like I think it helps everyone anyway when there's transparency.
yeah,
And like what's made me want to shift more into CG, for example, is like I'd say, I don't know what the calculations are, but let's say if you're a director in the Philippines, like a directing fee. So like if you're starting out for a whole project, let's say it's a 1 day shoot, you'd be making $1,500 if you're starting out. And then if you're better known or you're more established, you maybe make 3,000. This is just for like a 1 day shoot. And
yeah,
if you're better, it's 4,000. And if you, like the rock star directors here, I think they make like $10,000 for a 1 day shoot or something. And so compare that to, so that's about maybe like half a month's, like you can probably do 2 projects a month. And if you compare that to if you're an animator, and you're a good animator, but you're fresh out of school, I think the expected rate is something like 350 US dollars per working day. So if you had 350 US dollars for a working day and you worked like half of the month,
Yeah.
you're already making $5,250. And that's if you're fresh out of school. Like
Yeah.
that's if you're fresh out of school. And if you're really good and you're salvaged, that's like $9,000 for half of the month. So like competitively, like versus working as a director in the commercial industry here in the Philippines, let's say you like animation more, you'd actually be, if you can get international clients, like you'd be making like the comparable amount of money. So it's like it's hard to it's hard to say yes to the stress of a lot of the commercial directing projects if you're like, well, yeah. So
I get it. I get it. Well, I've kept you for a long time, but I do want to ask you. So let's say you start a new project tomorrow. You're going to direct a new. You can pick. You can pick. I'll let you pick as you answer the question. It's either a commercial or it's, a short film or something like that. What's your first step, or what's the most important step to you that you think like needs to be done when you're tackling this new project?
I think the most important for me, I think one is to keep moving, because I think I can kind of get obsessed with. So my first step is I visualize like what the final piece would be like. That sounds so cliche, like I visualize the final piece, but it's actually like really useful, at least from a commercials, like a commercial video or an ad. I guess that's where I'm coming from, but I think that's how I do any project, is like I try to imagine what the final piece would be like and try to get excited about that. So that means like I'm maybe making whooshing sounds in my head or out loud, and I'm trying to think of the timing and what's going to make it interesting. So often with commercial project is you've got to pitch that to someone else, or you got to make someone else see your vision. So that's been really useful, because if you can convince someone else, it actually makes it clearer for you. So that pitching or that bidding, or where you show, it's called a treatment deck to the client or the agency, has been really useful, because it's basically me saying, okay, it looks really cool in my head. How do I convince this other person that it's really cool? Whether that's getting references for the sound, for the visual, conceptually, what am I drawing from? And maybe these are all things that you're quietly and intuitively drawing from, but to take the person on that journey with you so that they get excited, like, oh my gosh, you have to make this now. That's what I do. And I realized when I was doing, so having to do these treatment decks, when I do them for like live action projects, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess the lighting's like this, and commercial lighting is very often like the same thing. And I wasn't getting as excited about them when there would be an animation project. I'd be like, oh, okay, like, how choppy is how choppy is the animation? How smooth is it? Are we going to use cell? Is it going to be cut out? Are we going to add some stop motion? Is it going to be in 3D? And what's the lighting? Is it moody? Like I would just come alive when I write the decks. And I think that was just another indicator for me that there was something about animation that I really liked. Yeah, basically I visualize it, and then like I said before, you just kind of constantly remake the thing over and over again from that first idea, and then higher and higher fidelity.
Yeah. For me, this is just a side note, but whenever I'm getting ready to start a video project, there's always like a scene that I can see before I even film. And when I am editing and I see that scene, then I like know that we've hit it. Like, okay, my idea is working because I see this scene here.
Yeah.
And it sounds a lot like what you're saying as far as visualizing that. Like, and I'm sure that a lot of creatives, whether it's a digital, a design or an oil painting or even writing a book or making a movie, like just having that idea and knowing like I'm going to stick to this idea until I see it, and then I'll know if it's a good idea or not,
Yeah.
But
Basically, yeah.
if people are listening and go down the show notes, Carl's Instagram and website are there. I'm going to let him say it in a minute, but he shows you his process on those places. He'll show you kind of like his animatics and his storyboards, and then he'll show you like the different trials that he goes through to get things to look the way they do. So, but you can kind of get an idea from Carl's social media, like that visual idea that he kind of puts out first before he actually gets to see it when it's done. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Go ahead. Sorry.
I will say that I think the term someone else used before was like a sort of mild synesthesia, in the sense that when I'm stuck, or even when I'm starting, I think finding a music piece almost always launches me like into it. A lot for a lot of the pieces, I like picture what it's gonna look like, but then sometimes it feels like a cheat actually, and I'll jump into a lot of the music sites, and one that I like a lot is Music Bed, because they have a lot of like cinematic pieces as well, and so I'll listen for something that I'm looking for that will help me with the pace, because in some ways I'm piggybacking off the storytelling that someone else has done, because when they
Sure.
write like especially a cinematic score, even though it's just a music bed, even though it's just a bed of music, they've already thought about introduction, build up, and finally climax. So I'm just wrapping the visuals I had around that pace. And a lot of stories I think follow the same formula, but and I don't know if it's a cheat. I feel like it's a cheat. Like hopefully one day I can just from the get-go just do it myself. I think like in the distant future, I'd like to do more and more music production in to the extent that I can sketch out the score. Like I don't know if I'll ever be I don't think I'll ever be a musical arranger or scorer, but I just want to be able to sketch out what I have so that I'm not so beholden to these music beds. But that's a huge thing for me, whether if it's like a funky track and I'm imagining something good. But even when I'm listening to music, I think that's why it's hard for me to listen to music while working, because I'm enjoying the groove too much, or I'm like the build up and I'm like, oh, this comes in here. And sometimes it's a music video in my head, even though I haven't like done any music videos. I
Yeah.
haven't done any big music videos, but that for me is so helpful. Like once I've got the script and the sketch, if I find a music piece, I'm like, then I can really start. Yeah.
Well, you are the second video director in the last 12 hours that I have heard say, go find music and then find out what the story is in the music and then edit to it. So we're on the right track here. I don't know if I'm going to hear 3 people say it in the next 24 hours, but we'll see. We'll see what goes on. All right. So my last official question for you is, and then I do want to ask you about your influences at the end, but as of right now, what do you want every one of your videos or your, you know, 3D animated movies or anything that you're making? What is an idea that you want that to communicate, or an overall idea that you think your art you know, should show people?
Yeah. I think I've also really been, I'm gonna say like maybe grappling with this idea of there's a part of me that there's a part of me that doesn't fully believe I'm an artist um, because of being like more of a designer and seeing things so much more from this like utility perspective. Doing more 3D and CG, I think it's shown me how much control I've been trying to have in like a commercial setting. For like a lot of the commercial projects I've done are very like controlled environments, or like a studio where I can like set everything. And I think that's why performance has been tricky for me from people, because I'm like, well, I don't know what I want you to do as a talking prop. Like, but and so that part is still very open, a medium that I haven't explored. But in CG and 3D, uh, I've seen like the worlds I'm like, I see like the worlds I could build, and that's actually exciting for me. And so I think I've been more at peace with seeing myself as an artist in that regard. So there's that. And um I say that just to establish this part of me that wants to create art, when I've always thought maybe there's people listening to who have heard their friends say like, oh, I need to create, and I need to make this film. And it sometimes seemed like, for me, that was like, well, I'm not that, like, I'm not gonna die. But I'm not gonna die if I don't make it. But at the same time, now I think I'm seeing more that artist part of me that really wants to just create. So there's that. And on the other end, um, I've seen more and more that I want to be doing like the most. If I'm gonna lend the skill I think that God has given me to communicate, whether that's through stories or conversations or film, um, that I think I've I'd like to be speaking about important things, and maybe I'm being black and white about it, but I feel like it's important that I tell people about the most important thing. That's been my faith and what Christ has kind of done for me. And and for a while that's felt like do I have do I have to kind of, I guess maybe there's this also this bad rap of like bad Christian movies that are like ham-handed, and I think the work of Bishop Barron on Word on Fire, he does like these cultural commentaries. I don't know if you've seen any of his videos, but he basically like talks about Christian themes within movies that are like almost completely secular, and it's such a great lens to see things at, because um like you see the seeds of the word, to take a term also from Bishop Barron, you see the seeds of the word everywhere. And I struggle with a sort of apparent everythingness of the secular world. I don't, for lack of a better term, there's like a sort of, yes, I could talk about everything in life, or I could just, you know, focus on this small little bit, which is like the Christian worldview. But then I think seeing more and more how Christ impacts every aspect of our lives is that it is actually more universal than you think. And I think like mystically, he's there in the things where we thought he wasn't at all. So I think there's actually this expanse of the ways in which you can express yourself as a Christian in your art. And I don't think it's always explicitly, hey, let me introduce you to my friend, the Lord Jesus Christ. Like it may not come out in that clear sentence, and sometimes it will. I'd like my work to talk about the expanse in the adventure of faith that most people don't think it is. Like your Christian life and your relationship with Christ, or really just discovering the transcendent, is so much bigger. I think when I did the film Dry Bones, like it's so much more badass than you think. Like I think there's a sort of like, yeah, we'll go to church, sing some songs, read the Bible. That sounds like I'm just settling or something. But the adventure of faith is so much more exciting. And I think taking the medium of, at least right now, taking the medium of motion design and film and showing, because there's some cool product videos that people do, like the new Nike, a new Nike shoe, and it's like, oh, it's coming together and it's like doing this cool thing. And then it's like when I read um, Ezekiel and like that Valley of Dry Bones passage, it's like this is, you know, the author was like, this is freaking special effects, like everything's coming together, and like he describes that you can hear the rattling, and I'm like, I can hear the rattling when you're describing it. And I think that's what I was trying to do with Dry Bones, is to kind of like, this is scary, like bones coming to life, and it's also like beautiful and amazing. And so for one thing, I think there's so much in the Bible, there's so much material there already. Like I've wanted to do stuff on the Old Testament, and because there's a lot of like a visual, you know, meat there. But at the same time, the project I'm doing now is I actually reached out to Word on Fire, because so like I got, I think my dad got each of us, and this Bible, the Word on
Oh,
Fire
that's
Bible,
cool.
and the Gospels. And what's so cool is they've got like particular to the ethos of Word on Fire, they've got the gospel, and this is just the Gospels,
Right.
and it's peppered with like
Oh, wow.
artwork from the masters and from like stained glass windows, and then there's commentary and essays on it. And honestly, like it really reads like you could sit down and be like, I'm gonna read some of the gospel, because like I think like there's not 2 pages. I think there's like 4 pages, but like 2 pages, and then there's commentary, and then so it's really, I think it helps you enter into it in a way that's like it's very not boring, like because I think the Bible is so deep and thick that it can be kind of um discouraging sometimes. And like, well, I didn't get that, and then you go through like a few chapters of Jesus talking a certain way, and you're like, well, it's so thick with metaphor that you kind of check out. But when you see other artists kind of interpret those different scenes and just the different aspects of the gospels, like it's encouraging. So what I did was I like this Bible so much, and I was like, man, like more people need to see this. Like it's the NRSV CE, which means like it's a translation that's used for lots of ecumenical dialogue, and it's so it and I think it's so good. So I guess inspired by that, I was talking to my wife, which I often do, Kim, like thinking, oh, what project should I do next? And I thought like, oh, maybe I should do the Word on Fire Bible. And then there were 2 other options. And then I thought I felt passionate about doing that. So that's the project I'm doing now, which is basically like a CG animated film of this Bible coming together. So it's well, I can show you the work in progress during after this recording, but like, and so I was like, yeah, because I wanted to. And when I was storyboarding it and I listened to the music, I mean, it's a little dramatic, I guess, but like I was, I was in tears when I was storyboarding it, because like what came to mind were all the people who I wished would read it. And yeah, like I was like, I was thinking of my friends who maybe like brush aside the Bible, and like if they could see it from this lens, and if this film could help them do that, I guess that's what made it feel so imperative for me to do it. So I guess and then so I I pitched it to them saying, hey, I don't know if you guys want to do this. And surprisingly enough, they were like, sure, let's do it. And so that was great, because that was supposed to be a personal project, and it turned into a client project, and they were able to give me the PDFs of the pages, which would have been like much harder to like reconstruct from
Yeah.
scans. So I guess work in that vein, more probably a lot of biblical work, but just work that kind of shows the great adventure of faith, whether it's explicit or more poetic. I didn't know so many Christian artists wrote metaphorically or poetically about the faith, and seeing how you can kind of talk about it without explicitly talking about it. And that doesn't mean you're hiding Jesus. It's just another way to get to the point, I think. Yeah, sorry, long answer.
Amazing answer. That was awesome. I loved everything about that. Like I wrote that down. Like I'd like my work to talk about the adventure and expanse of my faith in Christ. Like that's gold. I think I misquoted you a little bit, so I'll make sure I get it right when I do it on social media. But man, tell people where they can follow you and find out more about this work as you create stuff like Dry Bones. And once you get this this Bible sounds amazing. You're introducing me to this Bible here on the podcast, so I'm excited to learn more about it in the future.
So you can go to for my like official stuff, you can go to carlgraham.xyz, and that's my website, and hopefully that'll expand to more things, like the blog that's 3 or 5 years in the making that I haven't started. And for I guess you can follow me on Instagram too, and that's Carl Graham _ so Carl Graham _ on Instagram. That's where I'm most active, and I'm hardly active on that. So yeah.
All right. So once again, thank you so much to Carl for coming on today's episode and having this conversation with us. I didn't put it in the video because it obviously would be so long, but he and I talked for another half an hour after I finished just with the interview part of this conversation. He's got some great stuff in the works. He's working on that Bible that he talked about. I can't wait for you guys to see that project. Got to see a cool sneak peek there. So be sure to follow him, Carl Graham. There's GRAHAM _ on Instagram, or check out his website, which is listed in our show notes and in his Instagram bio, just to see his work that he's done up till this point and to keep up with him when he finally releases that Bible video coming out in a couple months. And then follow us, Destination Arete, ARETE, on Facebook and Instagram. That's a great place to connect with us and keep up with the latest episodes. And also, that's the best way to share this podcast, like the information about it with your friends. You can obviously share this episode with someone that you think might benefit from what Carl had to say, but sharing our posts with your friends or saving them or just commenting on them is a great way to let the algorithm know that you enjoyed our content, you want to see more of it. And it's also a great way for you to tell us what you enjoyed about these episodes and what you'd like to see more of. We're always looking to find out. We can look at the numbers on our Spotify and on our SoundCloud as far as like episodes played, but hearing from you guys that you actually enjoyed a certain aspect of the show really helps us out and helps us know like content we want to make in the future. So be sure to, subscribe to us, Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, all those places. And then if you want to be kind of on the inside track, you want to see like projects that we're working on, things we're learning, get-togethers, that sort of thing, the newsletter, destinationarete.com/contact, or just send us an email, destinationarete@gmail.com. Great way to be on the inside track. You'll be the first to know if we're having another meetup. Be the first to know about projects that we've made and the first to know about opportunities to get involved. I sent out a survey recently just asking if people would be interested in making things with us and got some positive responses there. So you never know in the future what's going to come your way with the newsletter. So we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of the Creative Community Podcast. And I'll see you then.